Hello, my spooky crew. Welcome. If you're new here, my name is Jacqueline, and this is Makeup Tales. Every Tuesday, for Tuesday Tales, I complete a makeup look while I narrate a scary story. If you like scary stories and you're interested in makeup, then I suggest you comment, like, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so that way you know when I post my videos. Disclaimer. The following story is intended for a mature audience and may contain graphic depictions, death, gore, sexual themes, and adult language. Viewer discretion is advised. For this week's story, it was written by Reddit user Crystal X Rose and is titled To Live or To Die. I gripped my steering wheel tightly, knuckles bone white with tension, shoulders bunched up and sore. The road spun out endlessly under my tires. A strip of slick black silk painted with bold yellow lines. My eyes noticed and then promptly ignored the beauty of the dark washed scenery around me. There was only one room for one thought in my mind. I had been at the end of my rope for some time now, but still too much of a coward to just turn out my own lights. I had tried therapy, only for the bitch to laugh and tell me I was beyond help. I had tried talking to the people in my life, but my own parents just shrugged it off. I had even tried drugs and alcohol to drown my depression, but I had found out the hard way that it wasn't the right road to go down. I had been debating over the best method of my execution when a friend of mine I hadn't heard from in years messaged me out of the blue. After some very emotional pouring out that left me feeling drained but somewhat relieved, my friend gave me some information that had led me to where I am now, driving down Route 236 in the middle of the night. She had told me to come to the beginning of the highway and just drive and think about my feelings and my depression. Let it really take me over. Then, she said, that's when she would come and make it all better. I remember pressing her on who she was, but she wouldn't tell me. She just said that she would come only when I was at the very, very end and couldn't stand it anymore, and that she would take all the hurt away. She had made it abundantly clear that for the entire time she was with me, I was not to look at her or I would belong to her. As long as I kept my eyes away, I would be fine. I would be healed, desperate for any relief from the impending shadow of my own death. I had agreed. I scored the shadowed landscape around me for any sign of movement, but saw nothing. My fingers clenched even tighter as hot tears prickled behind my eyes and my chest hitched. And suddenly, I was bawling out loud. great big gasping sobs that racked my body and forced me to struggle for breath. I pulled over blindly on the side of the highway, threw the car in park, buried my face in my hands, and just openly sobbed. It was like expressing poison from a snake bite. An enormous weight lifted off my chest in a flood of emotional downpour as I cried out every bit of hurt I'd ever struggled to push down. In the midst of my sobs, the temperature in my car dropped noticeably, and even the dry heat of the desert summer. Goosebumps rose to prominence on my arms. A cold chill wormed its way up my spine and between my shoulder blades with an icy fingertip, and my breath hung in the air like frozen crystal vapors. Then the voice spoke from behind me, murmuring soft things I could almost hear. Immediately, my hair stood on end. The voice, which I had been somewhat expecting to be deep and powerful, was little more than a high-pitched whisper of breath that drifted to my ears from somewhere beyond my vision. But it felt wrong. My entire being screamed at me to not turn around, to not lay my eyes on whatever was currently occupying my backseat, because to do so would mean the instant loss of whatever sanity I had left. And all at once, I knew that she had come, as if in response to my mental acknowledgement of the heavy presence. A soft breath drifted to my ears, but with it came the sickening stench of 1,000 rotting corpses under a blanket of desert sun, and I was unable to stop myself. I threw open the car door and emptied the last 3 days' worth of food from my stomach in a splatter on the pavement. After my stomach had settled, the voice came again. I can taste your pain. Then a hiss like an indrawn breath. What is it you want from me? I had a million things to ask, a million points of hurt I wanted to spill, but that all vanished in an instant, leaving only white, hot honesty. With tears threatening to fall again, I sighed brokenly. I want to stop hurting. There was silence, followed by a darkly throaty chuckle that made me want to scream. Is that all? Come. I want to show you something. The back door of my car opened, and then I physically felt the oppressive presence leave my aura. Careful to keep my eyes averted, I followed the voice over to the side of the road. I sensed, rather than saw, her raise an arm and point down into the darkness. Look there. I squinted out into the darkness and was able to barely make out a pair of glowing taillights far down below. With horror, I realized that there was no footing there. Only endless void of darkness down a sheer face. I stepped back, a lump in my throat, and turned back for the comfort of my car, but when I turned around, my car was gone. Sputtering and stammering, I nearly forgot myself then, turning in the general direction of the voice. I managed to catch myself just as a flash of white flickered into and back out of my view. Where is my car? Again, I sensed her point down at those suddenly damning twin spots of flame red so far down in the darkness. That is you, down there. You drove yourself off the cliff. No. I pressed my hands hard against my ears and squeezed my eyes shut in a weak attempt to block out her lies. But all at once, freezing cold hands were on mine, forcing my hands down to my sides and unblocking my ears. And her rancid breath flooded my nostrils with the odor of rot. I swallowed my gorge and forced my eyes shut even tighter, my friend's warning standing out in stark white against the blank, whirling fury of my mind. You wanted to die, did you not? The voice was no longer a breathy whisper, but a deep roar of monstrous proportions. The force of the voice blew my hair back and showered my face with foul-smelling spittle. I felt the cold hands move up and grip me by my upper arms, and suddenly I knew what was coming next. I struggled to twist away from those freezing cold hands. No, please! The voice boomed again. You wanted to die. So die! And with that, I was thrown violently out off the cliff and into the void of darkness. I snapped my eyes open and screamed, covering my face with my arms and fighting to brace for impact. And when it finally came, I crashed against the surface and plummeted down underneath the freezing cold water. Disoriented, sore from the impact, and still screaming. I clawed my way up to the surface, my scream choking off when I felt the icy hand grip my ankle and pull me down. Hold me down under the water. I kicked at the fingers that dug into the tender skin of my ankle, but it was like kicking stone. My lungs burned in my chest, and I felt myself start to gray out. My vision went dark, and I opened my mouth to scream. The water poured down my throat and into my lungs, just as my lungs felt like they were about to explode. I was hauled out of the water by more hands I couldn't see, which pulled me to my feet, none too gently. I was surrounded by yammering voices. Some men, some women, and was soaking wet and gasping for air. But the invisible hands that gripped me forced me along, anyway, to a wooden pole standing upright, all by itself. The voices around me began to clear up even as I felt more hands press my back up against the pole. My hands were then tied behind me with thick, rough rope that dug deep and scraped my wrists raw. It was then that I heard the chant begin spreading. Burn the witch! Burn the witch! Burn the witch! Wait, what? I cried out, fighting to get free of the ropes that lashed me fast to the hard post behind me, to no avail. I'm not a witch! That's what they all say. An invisible woman's voice jeered in my ear. But you're a witch, just as clear as I can see ya. And guess you what? You're gonna burn. The voices around me melted back into a wordless clamor. And then I felt the heat and looked down in horror. A flame had already been drawn to life in the pile of wood that now surrounded my feet. And the yellow-red tongues climbed higher, licking at my feet hungrily. I screamed in pain as my pants caught fire and my skin began to bubble and char as the fabric seared to my flesh. In mere moments, I was reduced to helpless agony as I felt my flesh melting off my bones, leaving huge exposed sections of sinewy muscle and bone for the fire to take. And still, the voices clamored on. It was when my hair caught fire and my face began to first grow warm, then melt into liquid puddles of pulpy flesh, that I found a new voice. Carried on new waves of fresh pain. The flames consumed my entire body as I felt myself dying and was ready to give in to the sweet release of death. The car blared its horn as it missed me by a hair. Goddamn asshole city drivers. I was no longer wet, nor on fire, but I was terrified nonetheless. I scanned my surroundings wildly, but saw only a busy street filled with the hustle and bustle of the city's nightlife. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so I took a few steps to prepare myself for whatever horrible thing might happen next. A footstep next to me made me jerk wildly, and I glanced up to see a large man in a mask staring down at me where I was sitting. That in itself wasn't terrible. What made it much worse was the dark, empty tunnel of the gun barrel that was pointed directly at my forehead. The man pulled the hammer back slowly, and when I heard the bullet enter the chamber, I froze. Please, I breathed, every muscle as taut as wire. Please don't kill me. The man's eyes remained locked on mine. His breathing became heavy and ragged, and when he spoke, his voice was deep and gravelly. Do exactly what I say, and I'll let you live. I let out a shaky whimper as he gripped my arm and forced me to my feet, then propelled me into the nearest dark doorway. The next thing I knew, he was on me then, grunting like a beast in heat. The hand with the gun stayed pointed at my head while the man pushed me down with the other hand onto the hard concrete floor. I struggled to get away, but the icy hands once again gripped me by the shoulders and pinned my legs apart. Through the floor, somehow, I found myself powerless to move. The man straddled me then, dripping sweat onto me as he fumbled clumsily for a knife. Almost teasingly, he snapped the blade out, turning it back and forth a few times so the light caught the silver blade's edge. Then, with a few unskilled cuts, he cut through my shirt, my bra, and my pants, leaving me only in my underwear. And still, the hands held me down. That breathy voice now laughing wickedly in my mind. The man turned the blade, then even as I screamed and fought against the hands that pinned me down, and slid the blade underneath the bottom of my underwear. With a sudden, sharp jerk, he jabbed me lightly with the blade on the inside of my thigh, and I bit back a sob of fear. Then he simply turned the blade again and cut through my underwear, leaving me now fully exposed and powerless to escape. Thankfully, I blacked out before the man was done, but the torture and abuse was something I'd only ever heard about or read in books. I was used several times in several different ways as the man acted out every one of his depraved fantasies on me. And then when he was finally finished and pulling up his jeans, I looked up at him through swollen eyes from where I lay on the floor, bleeding and bruised. And he returned the look, not one of pity, but of disgust. "You probably liked that, didn't you? You filthy whore," he growled. Too weak to move, I simply lay there shivering and aching, and he clicked his tongue in disgust. My vision grayed out, even as I felt myself fading out, but was brought back swiftly in a sharp relief by the sound of the gun cocking back. I managed to look back at him again to see that the gun was once more trained on my head. With all my strength, I whispered through battered and cracked lips, "You said you wouldn't kill me if I did what you wanted." The man shrugged. I lied. I somehow found the strength to scream once more, squeezing my eyes shut. "No, please! That's enough! I don't want to die anymore!" The gunshot was deafening in the tiny room, and I tensed, waiting for the bullet to tear apart my skull. But instead, I found myself standing back on the edge of the cliff in the darkness. I was whole and not naked or drowned or burned, but most of all, I was alive, and never before in my life had I been so happy to be on solid ground. I stumbled back in relief, sobbing openly again, but with celebration of my life, and felt the familiar and welcome soothed texture of the door of my car. The voice came then from somewhere in the darkness, once more that terrible, wrong, high-pitched whisper. "You no longer wish to die?" Unable to answer, I could only keep my head down. "Tell me now," the voice whispered demandingly. "Will your life become mine? Make the choice." I shook my head back and forth furiously. "No, never. I want to live. I want to live." Sobbing harder, I dropped to my knees, and I felt the icy hand touch me gently on the top of my head. "Then live you shall, but just know that I will always be watching you. And should you ever decide to take your own life again, I will be there, and you will belong to me. The hand drew back. Now go, go, and never, ever come back. I needed no more coaching. I leaped into my car, shoved the key into the ignition, and slammed my foot down on the pedal, spinning my tires wildly as I peeled off in the direction I had come earlier that night. I have heard some say that their guardian angel saved them, sat on their shoulder, and protected them from some danger. But what about when all the guardian angels are busy? I still say it was a demon that saved my life that night, that pulled me back from my dark thoughts and made me realize that my life is worth it. And who knows, maybe if someday another one like me happens to feel like their life is as worthless as I thought mine was, maybe they'll find Route 236, and maybe they'll meet her too. And maybe, just maybe, they'll be braver than I was. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's story. If you guys are interested in the story or the Reddit user, the link is down below. If you guys are interested in the products that I used during today's video, they are also listed in the description. If you want to take a look at any of my socials, I'm on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. They're linked down below. And if you have a story you would like me to narrate, you can also find my email. And remember, my spooky crew, stay spooky and stay glamorous. What the hell?